in reality, it's not enough to build a nuclear power plant and to produce electricity by running it, but we also have to, from the beginning, consider the question of waste, which is in many ways a driving concern for people both involved in the industry and the general public. So our next speaker, Chris Parker from Deep Isolation, will try to give us a fairly fresh perspective on how to potentially manage spent nuclear fuel and nuclear waste. Chris, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me, Reja?
We can see you and we can hear you. You're very welcome.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this conference. And I'm only sorry that I can't be there with you in person in Tallinn. I had been very much looking to come and join in the conference, but COVID-19 still being out there, that's not proved possible. So yes, I'm going to talk about the issue you just described, which is sort of management of the waste, and in particular, I'm going to look at the potential for borehole disposal of spent nuclear fuel in Estonia. So, by way of background and introduction, I am managing director of the European business of Deep Isolation, and what I'm going to do this afternoon is really talk through four issues. So firstly, the challenge that you've highlighted. So if Estonia does choose nuclear to be part of its low carbon future, how will it dispose of the resulting spent fuel? And that is a challenge that the world as a whole is still grappling with. Secondly, I want to describe a potential solution, which is deep borehole disposal, and in particular, a new form of borehole disposal, which Deep Isolation is pioneering, enabled by innovation in directional drilling technology. So I'll talk a little bit about that approach. Then I want to spend most of my time on point 3 on this slide. So sharing some results of a initial study we have undertaken in partnership with Fermi Energia, looking at the feasibility of implementing this technology, specifically within Estonia and Estonia's crystalline basement geology. And then finally, I'll end with some thoughts about next steps and how Estonia might look at integrating this issue into its future sort of policy and regulatory work. So the challenge that we're talking about is a significant one. So if you look on a global level, we've now been producing commercial nuclear power for 7 decades. And in all of that time, we have disposed of 1 gram of the spent fuel that we produced as a result of that power production. So we now have as a world community, we have a global stockpile of well over 400,000 tons of spent fuel, all of which is kept effectively in temporary storage facilities whilst disposal solutions are being developed. And we're adding to that at around 3% a year. Linked to that, we have, I think, a significant problem that the current model for geological disposal is simply not scalable. A lot of excellent work has been done in some countries on how this waste can be disposed of in depth through large mined repositories. That's, looking just at Europe, for example, that's a relatively small number of countries which have got very advanced plans on that in terms of, identifying sites and having clear budgets and licensed plans for disposal. I've highlighted a number of them here. some of them sort of neighbours of Estonia's in Scandinavia. My point about scalability is that these are all massive decade-long civil engineering projects that take decades to plan and deliver, and they cost billions. The data here on costs is being developed by the ERDO working group, looking at costs across a number of European nations. So question, does Estonia want to invest in that sort of disposal facility alongside its SMR, or is there scope for innovation to open up another approach? So that's where I'm going to talk a little bit about our company, Deep Isolation, because we were very much founded on the idea of bringing to market a solution to precisely that challenge, to offer safe, equitable, but much more affordable disposal of nuclear waste. So the company is relatively young. We were founded in the United States in 2016. The organization that I manage was launched about 12 months ago. We're based in London, but with a responsibility across Europe and the Middle East. So what we do is use state-of-the-art drilling technology, directional drilling technology, which can get to and find suitable host rock formations in a much greater number of areas more quickly and more rapidly than is possible when creating one of these big mined repositories. We do that in host rocks that have been isolated from the environment for millions of years. We take corrosion-resistant canisters containing the spent fuel. We put them in borehole repositories deep underground, so a kilometre, a kilometre and a half, 2 kilometres underground, much deeper than for example, the Swedish and Finnish examples that we looked at on the previous slide. And then we seal the access hole. And we do that using technologies that are widely used across the oil and gas sectors and the nuclear handling sectors, which we have integrated and enhanced with our own innovations. So this is bringing together tried and tested approaches that have been shown to work. Before looking at the results of our study in Estonia, I will just try and bring that to life by showing a very short video of how the system works. So let me talk you through this. In this example, I'm showing here a disposal canister that's about 32 centimeters across, about 4 meters long, and that's a BWR fuel assembly. So it slips inside the disposal canister. We seal the edges. If you look at it end on, you can see that's a very snug fit. And the canister has been made of highly corrosion resistant alloys, so material which should last thousands of years. We put that canister into deep rock. That rock can be sedimentary rock, as shown on this diagram. It could be granitic rock. It could be crystalline basement rock, as we have in Estonia. It could be salt. So we begin by drilling a hole in the top. And you can see here at the very top, there's a bluish area. That's the aquifer. We drill below the aquifer, put down a metal tube called a casing, and then put cement down the middle of that tube. So that cement then flows up the outside of the tube and gives us even greater protection against anything reaching the aquifer. Now that's a standard procedure done on a daily basis in the oil and gas sector. So once we've done that, we drill down further. Here we're going deep into the layers of rock to what's called the kickoff point, and then we start to bend very slowly, so slowly that if you were down there, you wouldn't notice it as you looked at it, until we reach the horizontal. Then we go horizontally for 1 kilometre, 2 kilometres, and that's the region where we're going to store the nuclear waste. We put cement down, we put casing down, just as we did at the upper level, and then we're ready to emplace the waste. So this is the canister. We attach several devices to the end of it. This one is what's called the tractor, and we'll see that working in a moment. We put this in shielding when it's above the ground to protect workers, and then lower it slowly into the hole using a cable. until it gets down past the horizontal section. And when we're in past the vertical section, and when we're in the horizontal section, that's when the tractor comes into play. So you'll see the wheels expanding, and then we drive the disposal canister to the end of the disposal section. Once that's done, we release the canister, we remove the tractor, pull it back up to the surface, and then place another canister. So that process is then repeated until all the spent fuel is in place. Once the canisters are all in place, we can then seal the vertical access hole with a range of sealing options depending on the local geology and regulation. And within a few years, the enormous weight of the rock above compresses those materials and provides an excellent seal to that narrow access hole. So now we've put the waste deep, much deeper than in a conventional mined repository, and that isolated depth turns out to be very important. And I'll say a little more about that as I go through the Estonia for the presentation for Estonia. But hopefully that gives you an overview of what we're talking about. Let me talk now about the work we've done looking at the feasibility of this technology within Estonia specifically. So this is a project that we've worked on with a group of industry partners. Fermi Energia has sponsored the work, and we've also worked closely with Steiger Engineering, who brought to bear real depth of experience on Estonian geology and drilling experience within Estonia to us. So that's been an excellent partnership in the project. I should stress that this has just been a preliminary study. So we've been analysing existing data. We've not undertaken any site-specific search at this stage. And so really this is just the first step in what would be a longer journey to look at geological suitability within Estonia. But within that context, we've been looking at really two key research questions. Is this safe, and is it deliverable? Is it a practical proposition from a drilling perspective? So does Estonian geology provide suitable host rocks in which a borehole repository could be safely sited, and where we could build a safety case for that, stretching out over a million years and more? And can we construct the repository in Estonian rocks on a cost-effective basis? So those are the two things we've been looking at, and our report sets out our analysis. I'm going to go through some of the headline conclusions. Firstly, just to drill down on the safety side of it more. We've done an Estonia-wide screening. We've looked at all 15 counties of Estonia from a safety perspective, looking at 4 major criteria, which are mapped really to the requirements that the IEA safety standards set out for geologic disposal facilities of radioactive waste. So seismicity, is the deep geosphere in Estonia historically stable from disruptive seismic events? Secondly, are there risks of a deep repository being disturbed by volcanic activity, by heat flows and volcanism? Looking at climate change impacts, so looking into the past, what past glaciation and so on has done to the Estonian geology, and what are expected future trends, and what do they suggest? We've also looked at the hydrological environment at depth. So what evidence is there that there are sites which have been entirely isolated from Estonia's biosphere, from the surface environment, and for millions of years? What I'm going to show really is a summary of our findings, and we've summarized it against these 4 levels here. Really clearly, that's, although we've numbered them 0, 1, 2, and 3, this is a qualitative assessment on a county by county basis, looking at Are there any areas of the country which are entirely unsuitable, where there are such significant risks at a broad scale in the area that we should just rule that out? To are there at level 3 areas where we see no significant risks at all? Key findings from this, really 3 things. So the first key conclusion is that we believe the evidence suggests that a deep borehole repository would be both a safe and affordable option for Estonia to consider for its waste. So looking at the safety issues on the left there, we've looked at some preliminary modelling, quantitative modelling of what would happen in a repository based in crystalline basement. So this is not specific to a specific site in geology, but it's a generic model in crystalline basement geology with fracture networks and so on, very similar to Estonia's. And that shows that this would provide robust levels of safety. So the modeling suggests that the peak dose of radionuclides arriving at the surface wouldn't occur until well after 1 million years, 1.3 million years. And that level, that peak dose level, would be 3 orders of magnitude, 1,000 times below the regulatory requirements for safety. So this is a robust solution which is using that great depth of rock to keep radionuclides isolated from the surface. Looking at the data on the right there, again, this is an early indication where the specific type of reactor that's for Estonia is not being factored into this. Costs are clearly site specific, but nevertheless, looking at existing research, it does suggest that this would be a significantly less expensive option than a borehole repository. The data here comes from very recent research by the Electric Power Research Institute, EPRI, looking at a number of borehole scenarios and comparing with the typical costs of a mined repository. And as you can see there, the borehole scenarios represent sort of between 24% and 31% of the cost of disposal in a traditional mined facility. Second key conclusion is that we see no fundamental geological limitations to siting of nuclear waste in deep horizontal boreholes in Estonia. We see a wide range of siting options are available. The chart here is illustrative. We've simply represented those qualitative judgments on the 0 to 3 scales, which themselves clearly bring together a lot of different data points, and map the 15 counties against them. Really just to illustrate 2 key points: that there are no parts of the country where the evidence suggests you would just rule out from any full siting exercise, because we think in all parts of the country are likely to find to offer sites which could be demonstrated as providing a safe environment on a million-year safety case. But the second key point is that there is a cluster of counties, so Lääne-Viru County, Ida-Viru County, Harju, which on both the safety thing aspect and viewed from a cost-effective delivery perspective, scored highest on our metrics. And those really are on the northern coastal region and the islands. So from both a safety perspective and an operational perspective, that's where we see as the areas with the greatest likelihood of providing a number of host rock formations which would work. So they combine a number of optimal conditions. So the depths we're talking about would be particularly isolated from aquifers, which in the south of Estonia tend to be at different depths to the north. The coastal site will would facilitate seismic surveys, so making it easier for us to do site characterization. So where does that leave us? As I said, this has been a preliminary study only. We're sharing that with stakeholders in Estonia. We published a summary version of it. Clearly, extensive further work would be needed to identify the right sites and to characterize them as safe, to engage with potential host communities and ensure that they were consenting and embracing the idea of this. And we've set out recommendations on how those issues might be best taken forward in Estonia in 5 domains, really, as illustrated. So policy and regulatory issues, social and community issues, geological issues, demonstrating this within Estonian geology, and building the more detailed business case for this. But our one overarching recommendation, I think, and this is the key message I would leave today, is that as Estonia, as the government, and in conjunction with citizens, considers nuclear power and considers the SMR option, please think about developing the strategy for managing the resulting spent fuel in practice. Our initial assessment is that basing that strategy on deep borehole disposal is a viable and attractive way forward. So look at establishing a clear implementation plan which addresses all of these issues that we've highlighted on a parallel track, so that the disposal route can be in place at or before grant of the operating license for the nuclear power plant. And final point, there is no question that if Estonia were to do that, it would establish Estonia as a world leader, the only country in the world to have put in place a clear disposal route for nuclear waste before it starts to produce that waste. We believe that's the right and responsible thing to do, and we very much urge Estonia to consider that as it takes this agenda forward. On that note, thank you very much, and happy to take questions if we have time.
Presentation. If you don't mind, I would like to ask you just a couple of questions. The first one being, well, Estonia likes innovation, but not to be left alone with a solution. So would we be the first and the only to use this type of waste management solution?
So, would you be the first? No, I don't think so. So to be clear, this is a technology which is not yet in full implementation anywhere. Deep isolation has demonstrated significant aspects of the technology in operation. So at our test site in Cameron in Texas, in conjunction with our global drilling advisors Schlumberger, we have demonstrated the emplacement of canisters, shown how they can be retrieved and brought back to the surface. So there is significant demonstration. There is also significant interest in this from governments around the world. We're engaging with national waste management organizations across Europe, the Middle East, the Far East. There is a lot of interest. In terms of, when will this be implemented and on a license basis, that's clearly not entirely in our hands. I was asked the same question in November when I was on a panel bringing together a range of deep borehole experts from government, from the IAEA, from universities, from research institutes, under the aegis of IFNEC. So IFNEC is, as some of your participants may know, is a government-to-government network of leaders in nuclear waste management. and this IFNEC panel was focused on deep borehole disposal, and they were asked the same question. So when do we think this will be operational? The consensus of opinion on the panel was that this technology is increasingly mature, and it's reasonable to assume that there will be licensed operational delivery of disposal within deep boreholes by 2030. Our view as a company, based on the engagements we're having with a number of governments, is that it should be possible to get to implementation significantly before that, and we're investing to help make that happen. But either way, certainly from an Estonia perspective, that would be well before the country needed to dispose of any waste from a new build SMR in Estonia. So I think the potential for you to innovate is around the policy and regulatory process, and being the first to have the solution in place. In terms of the actual implementation, Estonia would be able to draw on practical operational and regulatory experience from other countries.
Thank you very much, Chris, for that thorough answer to that question as well.